is a spiritual deity. Freedom and liberty and justice shall fight for you. When you fight for freedom with all your soul, take it from me. This is Broadcasting Corporation of Biafra, BCB, the voice of the nation, the voice.
Okay, so we welcome our first keynote speaker then to give us the first keynote speech for the day.
Okay.
I believe it's me.
Oh, sorry.
The Prophet, okay, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right. Thank you for this opportunity to contribute to the memorial. I have some PowerPoint, but I'm not going to show all of it. I'll just, walk around it. And please bear with me. If you can't hear me clearly, do let me know. So the title of my piece is Biafran Genocide. Why we must remember. Okay. And my presentation is informed by a number of things. As some of you know, I have been doing some work on the question of genocide and specifically Biafran genocide. So I'm looking at it through the lenses of the UN documents, the convention, the genocide, what is called the Genocide Convention. And then, also through, trauma, as it is trauma. There's no doubt about it. And then the other one has to do with, Professor Gregory Stanton's definition of 10 stages of genocide. So I'm going to try and make this as less academic as possible. And if you're hearing some academic language, it is because I am an academic by training. So you may hear some of that, but I will try and make sure that it's not as academic so that we can have some conversation. Okay. So and then post-colonial studies, just this is background that we all know. Nigeria, as we know, is a product of British colonization. And even though colonization ended, the legacy of that colonization did not stop. So from its very inception, Nigeria has been violent. And it has been violent specifically to indigenous communities. But in our case, as far back as the 1940s, that violence has been perpetrated and, against us, specifically Igbos. So I don't want to go through the catalog of the various massacres from Jos to Kano to Kaduna, but that, most of you here know that, so I'm not gonna do that. But, the most recent massacre or series of atrocities committed against Igbos in Nigeria post the 2023 elections also suggests the continuation of genocide, or at least mass atrocities against us. All of those together are acts of mass atrocities. It doesn't matter how people define it. Right now, when they talk about genocide or mass atrocities in Nigeria, they look at it in terms of, they look at them as if they were simply religious, but they're not primarily religious. Sadly, as Biafrans, more specifically Igbo Biafrans, we are caught in the intersection of various types of atrocities: religious, ethnic, geographical, political, you name it. Okay. And so why must we remember? So that the memorialization of Biafra Remembrance Day, as I see it, should not be primarily for the people who have fallen. Yes, it is important to remember them, but we also, but that remembrance connects us to the history of things that we have experienced. These people fell because they were also involved in the history that we experienced and the history that continues today. So, according to the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, Article 2 of that convention states that genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy. So please, I want you to pay attention or to key into these definitions: the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. And all of those apply to us. It is the intent. Some people, in one of the conferences I attended, somebody said, well, if everybody did not die, is it still genocide? Yes, it is. It is the intent to destroy in whole or in part. It doesn't mean that everybody has to be killed. A certain percentage, the idea is that intention that they want to destroy. And so that's important, whether it is national, ethnical, racial, or religious. You might say it's not racial for us, but it is ethnical, regional. It also is religious if you add the Christian component to it. And I also want to recognize that in Biafra land today, there are people who are not necessarily Christians, but they are implicated by virtue of their ethnicity or their belonging to that particular region. And so we can look at the region as constituting even a national geographical location, Biafra. Okay, so there are various elements of this convention that, that also affect us. So, and they would include, and I want to share this if possible. Let's see if I can share this part. All right. So in this case, you have the killing of members of the group. Have we experienced that? Yes. Causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. Have we experienced that? Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. Did we experience that? Yes. Are we still experiencing that? Yes. Imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. Okay, you might say that hasn't happened, but it is happening. Kidnapping Biafran women, raping Biafran women, forcing them to marry into groups that are antagonistic towards Biafrans. Yes, it means that it is a way of thinning out or cleansing Biafran lineage within that particular group, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Okay, so moving on, here's another one. Okay, so these acts are therefore punishable according to the convention. So genocide is punishable. The conspiracy to commit is punishable. Direct and public incitement to commit genocide is punishable. If we recall that in 1966, Radio Kaduna was broadcasting all sorts of things, to kill Nyamiri. In Kano, yes, they used all sorts of language to describe us. So any attempt to commit genocide is punishable. Complicity in genocide is punishable also. You don't have to have committed it or directed it, but if you participate, actually, you don't have to have a hand in it. You may incite. That's having a hand in it. You may not necessarily kill somebody, but if you incited it by language or your actions or policies, Okay, so I want us to remember these things, because the word genocide, people fling it all over the place and they don't pay attention to the implications of what's happening to us. So that if we start looking at what we're experiencing even today, you can see how this experience since the war collectively would constitute an emergent genocide, but it is part of mass atrocity. Okay, so this is just taking us back, back to 1966 to see how that language has emerged. Okay, so if you recall, part of, again, part of the remembrance it's not just simply to remember those who have died, but to remember what has led to that particular, to the particular, to these deaths, or the condition that caused the deaths. And I'm not going to catalog all of them, but I just wanted us to remember some of these things, so that in Kano in 1966, during that massacre in Kano, here is, this is reporting from Times Magazine. The Times Magazine eyewitness account says that the massacre began at the airport. And you remember this because it was in the news. In fact, as a kid, I remember this. It was one of the first pieces that we heard about the killing of Igbos, because we were living in the north at that point. So the massacre began at the airport near the 5th Battalion's home city of Kano. A Lagos-bound jet had just arrived from London, and as Kano passengers were escorted into the customs shed, a wild-eyed soldier stormed in, brandishing a rifle and demanding, "Ina Inyamiri, Hausa for where are the damned Igbo?" So if you look at this through the context of genocide, or the language of genocide, part of it is naming the group. Ina Inyamiri, it's a derogatory term used to refer by Hausas or Northerners, used to refer to Igbos. And in this case, therefore, because it's stereotypical, it's derogatory, it becomes a symbolization of these particular people as bad people, the equivalent of vermin. You name them, you persecute, therefore you can persecute them. So the screaming the bloody curses of a Muslim holy war, the Hausa troops turned the airport into a shambles, bayoneting Igbo workers in the bar, gunning them down in the corridors, and hauling Igbo passengers off the plane to be lined up and shot. Okay, we might say, okay, this happened in 66, but bear in mind that there would be a repetition of this sometime in 67 in Asaba. Okay. Here are some of those images. By the end of it, more than 400 Igbo people had been killed. The language of genocide, why we must remember. It wasn't just simply killing us, but the acts themselves also constitute, genocide, and we must remember the genocide. Anthony Enahoro, Nigerian Commissioner for Information, at a press conference in New York in July 1968 said, quote, "Starvation is a legitimate aspect of war." Of course not. The International Criminal Court has ruled that it's not. It's not. Here, food has been used, starvation is being used as a weapon of war. What's the intention? To exterminate them, to kill the group in whole or in part. Brigadier Benjamin Adekunle of the Nigerian Army, to a French radio reporter, said, "I want to see no Red Cross, no Caritas, no World Council of Churches, no Pope, no missionary, and no UN delegation. I want to prevent even one, in part, even one Igbo having even one thing to eat before their capitulation. In other words, let them all die. I don't even want one." So let's recall the deaths of our people, the children who suffered from kwashiorkor. Here, food is being used as weapon of war. Starvation is being used as weapon of war. And of course, the big piece that people remember often, the Asaba massacre, where men above the age of 10 were lined up and shot in a square, killing somewhere between 700 to 1,000 people in the early morning, early days of October. So you might say, therefore, so I'm thinking of how we disremember or remember traumatic stories and histories. I have been asking myself, where are the memorials for those who died during the Nigeria-Biafra War? Where are the memorials for the Biafra fallen? There are two that I can recall. The recent one at Asaba, the Asaba Massacre Memorial Site, there's the link for it. You can just do a Google search, you'll find it. The other one is the War Museum in Umuahia, but it's not devoted to Biafra. It is that Nigerian Army War Museum with remnants of planes, parts from, the Biafra there. So by the end of the war, we know how many people, people lower estimate the government. If we're using the government's estimate, it's 3 million. There are also suggestions that it's more than 3 million, 6 million, even higher, had died. So the way I'm looking at this is an aspect of disremembering. There's a silencing of history. In other words, we're not telling the story of what happened. And part of not telling the story is erasing that memory, that knowledge from the textbooks. Nobody teaches about Biafra. I've been talking to teachers at home in the South, including my relatives who are educators. No, this story is not in the textbooks, not regionally and not nationally. So therefore, there is also, we know of the refusal to acknowledge that there was mass atrocity or that the Biafran genocide happened. I belong to a number of discussion platforms here in the United States. I left a couple of them because each time that this topic comes up, those people on the platform, especially Yorubas and Hausas, attack everybody else. They see it as causing trouble. But I looked at other models, Rwanda, for instance, that happened in 1994. The war ended in 1970, no memorials except for 2. One, actually, that was created by the people in the community themselves, that's for the Asaba massacre, none nationally. In Rwanda, there are over 250 registered memorial sites for the 1994 massacre. Why is there silence about us? This is from the Rwandan Genocide Memorial Site. It says, one sees more skulls in Rwanda than in any other country in the world. They are displayed publicly as a reminder of the horror of the genocide in spring of 1994. They came from the Nyamata Memorial, located about 30 kilometers south of the Kigali capital. The human remains of 50,000 murdered victims were buried at this site. The memorial is one of 6 national commemorative sites. I'm repeating the words deliberately. Commemorative sites in Rwanda. There are more than 250 registered memorials in Rwanda dedicated to the 1994 genocide. You can do a search and you'll find them. And those pictures are also public because this is in the public domain. Here's an example. This is from the Kigali Memorial. So you can see these. It's the remains of, people, but there is none for Biafrans. And of course, the one that I mentioned earlier, the Asaba Massacre of October 1967. So you can visit the site and look. So why do we memorialize things? Why is it important? Somebody asked me this once and said, why do you really, why is this important to you? Because I keep talking about it. Well, for me, part of it is truth seeking. We're looking for the truth, whatever that means, whether it's horrible or it is good, but we want to know. But it's also part of the preservation of memories. That's why we call them memorials, because people don't want to forget. They want to be connected to the past, even if it is painful. You want to remember so that you don't repeat it. And maybe so that you can make amends. For some people, it is to have closure, collective mourning. Here we are today in disparate areas or various areas of the world. Some of us are doing this, others are not doing this. I spoke to my siblings this morning and they're talking about lockdown. Nobody is anywhere. They are all in different areas. There is no gathering anywhere, no bench anywhere on the roadside of the road, no seat, no table, no platform, no nothing, no tree, no statue, no pillar devoted in our communities to remember this day, to remember what happened to us, which also means that there is great forgetting. Maybe not complete amnesia, but there is a forgetting. Memorials serve as a place of collective mourning, a place of collective memory. It is a legacy to the past and an attempt to heal from trauma. If you don't remember, you don't know what happened to you, you may not know what is causing you harm. And I do believe that part of the harm we're experiencing has to do with this. It is also a place of education. As I mentioned earlier, they don't teach about this in our textbooks, in the curriculum at home. But especially as we're doing today, a place to honor those who sacrificed for us. So I ask you, you don't have to tell me, you can type in your information in the chat. How many Biafra memorial sites do you know? And then think about the locations that you know in terms of where the atrocities, where a lot of people died. Besides Asaba, where are some of those other places? You can put them in the chat room. We can share later on. Why must we remember? You might continue to ask, well, I said truth seeking. The International Center for Transitional Justice states that truth-seeking initiatives can play a powerful role in documenting and acknowledging human rights violations. Memory initiatives also contribute to the public understanding of past abuses. So we want to understand why this happened, how it happened, who is responsible. And this is, part of what the memorialization does. You might also say that some of the memorialization, has happened through conversations, books, publications. Yes, they have, but they are not necessarily public in the way that the examples that I gave you from Rwanda are. Not many people have the opportunity to read the books that I read or even buy them. There are memoirs, there are literary representations or interpretations. There are critical engagements with the war. And here are some of the examples that just a few of them, there are quite a lot of them, but these are just a few. So you can do searches and find them. Truth seeking, not for Nigeria necessarily, because more than 50 years after the war, the truth eludes us. Only a few try to remember. We are still interrogating what Biafra means. What does Biafra mean, actually? For us, for everybody. We continue to face killings in Biafra, particularly Igbos, and the destruction of their properties. I mentioned a short while ago the recent, the result of the recent elections. I'm going to stop briefly. So I'm not done. I have a few more points to make and then I'll be done.
Okay, Prof, another 3 minutes.
I'm almost done.
Okay.
Okay, so in terms of remembering or memorialization, I look at one of the comments made by a Rabbi Mark Tenenbaum, who is the director of Interreligious Affairs Department of the American Jewish Committee. And he said, there's one thing that came out of the Jewish attempt to remember things, that he said out of the Holocaust, the Jewish people have salvaged one permanent lesson, that there must never again be silence in the face of atrocities and human suffering. And maybe that's why we need, we need the memorials. And so here, I'm gonna close. Let me see, where am I here? Okay. All right, so, okay. I'm closing here. So if we're thinking in terms of these memorials, so how do we memorialize, Biafra and our experience in terms of what I'm talking about? One of the things we can do is, to begin to construct, some sites of memory locally. Can we do that? Can we work within our own communities, even if the state governments or our local or general, the state governments won't do it, or Nigeria won't do it, probably will never do it. Can we do that ourselves? We can do temporary exhibits and talk about and really begin to talk about this. It needs to get somewhere. It needs to be foregrounded. Education is also a way of doing this. I know that I tell my siblings that if the issue of Nigeria comes up at any time, you need to place beside the story of Nigeria, the story of Biafra too, because it is a story. And then, of course, there is need for a national truth-telling. So between 1999 and 2002, there was Obasanjo's Oputa panel that, what they called the Truth Commission. Yeah, they were commissioned to investigate what happened. But when that report, the final report, was sent to him, he never made it public. It's never been revealed what happened. What did they find? Who did they hold accountable? Did they even hold anybody accountable? I want to know. I do think that that's part of that memorialization of what is happening, or remembering of what happened to us. There has to be some kind of truth-telling if we are to move forward. There has to be a foregrounding of this story. There has to be the incorporation of our experiences into the larger narrative. Somebody asked me a while ago, but what about the Asaba Memorial Site? Of course, it is important. I'm not saying it is not, but you can't tell the story of Asaba without telling it within the context of the larger story of Biafra. It's more like, telling the story, if you're going to talk about the Holocaust, we have to talk about it within the context of, the World War. And we can't talk about Treblinka without talking about the larger picture of the Holocaust, of what happened to the Jewish people. And that's my parallel. So I'm saying that we must remember so that we don't forget, so that the next generation will not forget, so that the next generation will understand where it came from and how and why certain things are happening to it, so that those whom we lost will not be written out of history, and we also will not be written out of history. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Prof.
Thank you very much. It's really good.
Excellently delivered. Why we must never forget. I'm going to open the floor and just give open the floor and give people opportunity to comment on what they've just heard. If you would like to raise your hand, I'll invite you, and you just have about 2 minutes to make comments or possibly ask Prof any question you may want to put to her.
I may not respond, just so you know.
So if you just raise your hand with the hand raising tool, I will. If there's anyone who has any comments, be given 2 minutes to comment or ask questions. Okay, I do not see any hands so far. Oh, bro,
Okay,
EM has a question.
No, not a
or
question.
comment.
Just to my
Oh,
comment. Just
go
to
ahead.
thank you to Prof for a wonderful presentation that is full of facts and emotional stuff. These are things we must continue to talk about and pass it on to future generations. So thank you very much, Prof. I think Brahima has his hand raised.
Thank you for listening to us today. Join us next time for news, cultural, and educational programs. This is the Broadcasting Corporation of Biafra, BCB.
Hail to Biafra, consecrated nation. O Fatherland, this we must only pledge. Defending thee shall be our dedication. Spilling our blood will count a privilege. The waving stands and reachable is the free shall always be our flag of liberty. We shall emerge triumphant from this ordeal, and through the crucible unscathed will pass. When we are poised, the wounds of battle to heal, we shall remember those who died in mass. Then shall our trumpets peal the glorious song of victory. We score, oh my and wrong. Oh God, protect us from the heathen pitfall. Guide all our movements, lest we go astray. Give us the strength